Or
Hello and welcome. We're tuning in today on Solstice, June 21st, 2022. It's Tuesday today, and we're coming to you from Cowichan Bay, the land of the Hokomina. And we're really excited today to talk about the approaching new moon in Cancer happening next week. Before we dive into that, we're just going to talk a little bit about Cancer as a myth and what that constellation has been known to connect us to. And then we're going to talk about the new moon, the chart that's associated with it, and some points in your chart that you might want to look for to see what might be coming up for you in your personal experience of the new moon. And then we had a question that came up last time, so we're going to address that and share a little bit of poetry and connections of artwork with Cancer. Yeah.
Whoa. So before we tuned in here, we were talking about the definition of an archetype versus a myth. Mm-hmm. And so the signs of the zodiac are myths in which the archetypes of the planets live by. So when you have like this new moon, we have the sun and the moon in conjunction in the sign of Cancer. So the archetype of the moon and the sun are experiencing the myth of Cancer. So then we're studying today the myth of Cancer. So how does Cancer fit into the evolution? Because the zodiac is a cycle of evolution. You got this little book, The Astrology of Fate. So we're going to be studying the myths of the signs and try to dive a little bit deeper in this video series on getting to understand the signs. So what does Cancer mean to you, Day?
I'll get right to that, but I also just, because I'm visual, maybe you are too, I'm just going to share on the board how that kind of looks, because I tend to call the signs a archetype, and Martin kind of helped me today remember that it's actually more the myth and that the planet is the archetype. So for instance, right here we have Saturn, and behind it is Aquarius, and then this would be us on the Earth. So how astrology works would be that we would associate that Saturn is in Aquarius right now, and so it's passing through the myth of Aquarius, but it is an archetype of Saturn. I don't know. So sometimes, I don't know, I'm visual, so I thought that might help you. So then going back the other way over here, we got Cancer. And what is Cancer for me? Cancer, I associate a lot with home and creative potential. I look at it, it's the first water sign in the zodiac, and it's also the second cardinal sign. So Aries being the first cardinal, and then this Cancer being the next cardinal sign. So there's a lot of initiation and instigation of new, and yet it's watery. So there's a moodiness that's typically associated with Cancer archetype and or Cancer myth. And I think that that's pretty accurate because it's constantly trying to bring in something new. Yeah, that would be a couple things I associate with it.
Okay, so here's Luna is the ruler of Cancer, and Luna, the only sign that she rules is Cancer. So then Luna and the moon. This is a poem I wrote many years ago. So they're solstice babies. We just had the summer solstice. So then the folks born under the sign of Cancer have that vitality. It's so Cancer is a water sign, and it is also a cardinal sign, so initiating and watery, so very emotional. They're moon children. They're associated with the world mother. Cancer has a lot to do with the parents join in eternal cohabitation. So we have our new moon here. So the sun and the moon in an eternal cohabitation, a sacred marriage. It's about family. From these waters of Cancer, all life comes from. You were reading earlier in Liz Green's book about how Cancer used to be the first sign of the zodiac because it was associated with the gateway of the soul, right? So the gateway entering into life, exiting life. And so from all these waters, all life comes from. Cancer is mystical, it's psychic, it's about feeling, and it is to protect, driven to seek the divine source, to birth the images of the oceanic realm. So this we approach the more creative aspects and the deeper aspects of Cancer, to free ourselves from the parents or to become our own parent, and an aggressive longing for the womb. So very suggestive picture of Luna in an alchemical woodcut, and Cancer, the powerful connection with the Divine Mother. So that's a deep dive into Cancer. So how have you been feeling this? How you've been feeling this solstice? How was the solstice for you?
Beautiful, potent. I've been busy at a really beautiful sacred gathering this last weekend, and just reintegrating from that, and really landing in myself and home in a new way, feeling very transformed from the experience, which is nice. And then today, showing up for work and service, and showing up for our service, and showing up for life right now in a deep form of service, but also from like a place of home connection within myself, is really very grateful for that.
That's beautiful. I was writing in my journal this morning about how you can really feel the energetic shift. You know, we're coming to that point where we've been pushing towards really getting, you know, more insight in what it is that we're supposed to do. And then the solstice is this imperceptible shift. From now, all of the days are going to start getting shorter, you know, and today was especially cool, you know. It almost felt like, instead of the first day of summer, it almost felt like the first day of fall, really, in a sense, you know. So a sense that maybe, you know, that's a trend for this summer, but also a reality that it's time to start reining it in, you know, start looking at harvesting all that we've been planting, all that we've been really working hard towards. Now comes the more introverted half of the year, where every day the energy will be ebbing back towards the shortest day of the year. So this is a big natural shift that we get to pay attention to. And I think in essence, that's the meaning of Cancer. You know, Cancer is about protecting, you know, everything that we've accomplished, you know. So in the last 6 months, you know, we've been creating, working towards emancipating ourselves into the world. And now, you know, Cancer seeks to protect everything that we've accomplished, and to nurture ourselves, and to relax and give ourselves a little time to, you know, smell the roses. And again, I feel that deep call for introversion myself.
Likewise. Yeah, I'm excited. I made the pact to really pull it back in this month, and so today is a beginning of that process.
Beautiful.
Actually, it fits really well because Cancer, as I've shared on these videos before, with tissue salts, Dr. Carey's work is associated with the tissue salt number 1, which is calcium fluoride. And that's the tissue salt that holds all of our connective tissue in our body. So it's that containment, and it really contains the body and the connective tissue within the body and the bone structure. It's really good for teeth. And then Cancer is connected with also our breasts and our muscles and our tone, which is coming back all into that connection. Sorry, so that just reminded me.
What's the salt again?
Calcium fluoride.
Calcium fluoride. So, cool. Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's make a deep dive into the chart to see what's going on with the chart itself. We're gonna get our pen. Boom. So we have that moon, sun in Cancer. So So look at your own chart and see where your planets are. And if you have any planets at the beginning of Cancer there, then the new moon falls on your on that planet. And so then we have the sacred marriage of the sun and the moon in Cancer. So then in Cancer, the moon is stronger. So here the moon, the emotions are really, the feminine is really much more in charge, and it makes a square to a Jupiter Chiron conjunction. We actually just lived through a Mars Chiron conjunction, and earlier than that, we lived through a Mars Jupiter conjunction. That's been a really key to this spring that we lived through. And now the sun and the moon are in square to that Jupiter Chiron ruled by Mars. So we have the warrior, emancipator. So Mars, the warrior, Jupiter, the great enthusiasm, the great benefiter, and Chiron, the wounded healer. So then there's a real need to nurture and to heal. You know, it's really been some of our most important focus. And then this new moon really brings that home, you know, a time of ebb of energy towards, you know, becoming our own warrior and energizer of the healing process of our wounds. Really key, huh? Mm-hmm. How you been doing with that?
It's been very in my face this last weekend, especially the need to care for myself in order to be able to keep doing the work and showing up and sharing my gifts and sharing my love for all that around me. It reminds me of the heart, and it's neat that Cancer rules the breast and around the heart, where it's the heart always feeds itself first, and then it's able to take care of the whole body. Mm-hmm. And there's, I think, especially when I witness the myth of Cancer and a lot of my friends that have strong Cancer placements, they tend to be very good at taking care of themselves, and when they're not, it really throws them off. So there's a lot of medicine there, and learning to take care of yourself first, and then from there being able to give so much more.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What I saw also to be important in this moon is, you know, Mercury is in its home sign of Gemini, so very communicative, and it makes a trine to Saturn, so discipline of the mind, and then Mercury to Uranus. Mercury semi-sextile to Uranus. So whenever we have angles of Mercury and Uranus, we have genius. So you know, I've been feeling a lot of ease in my studies. You know, this is a good time for intellectual practice, getting insight into this process of healing. And then I noticed how there is this combination of semi-sextile going from moon, sun to Venus, and then Mercury to Uranus, and Uranus to Mars, Jupiter, Chiron, to Neptune, to Saturn, forming this really beautiful green bowl there. So it seems like all the energies are flowing really well towards the integration of the healing process, and that we're getting some insight into that process. And then we have that Pluto, Mars, Pluto, Venus, you know, so it's quite willful, and the healing of the Venusian creative side of our personality, you know, it's really, really becoming important to do that. And I think it's been important all along, and we're really feeling into it. You've been feeling that too?
Definitely, yeah. A huge need to show up for the creative aspects of life.
So that leads us to the question that came to us. A friend sent a message about this question, and she said, what does it mean when we say doing the work? You know, so what does it mean doing the work? You know, that's a popular expression. I think it can be taken on different levels. What do you think when you think of doing the work?
Me, I think, yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at it. When I think of doing the work, I feel like, well, I base it around what I've perceived to be true so far for myself, at least, which is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And I think we're here to be our energetic part of the whole. And so integrating and showing actualization to that energetic process. So that could be showing in all sorts of ways, but especially important to taking that time to integrate your external and internal self, your feminine and masculine, your light and your dark, and then also what you need of yourself and what the world needs of you. And there's this duality we live in this three-dimensional reality, three-dimensional and plus. And the integration work is what I call the work of how do we integrate those, the two sides of ourself, the two sides of nature, the two sides of reality. But I also really love how you put it. You put it eloquently. How do you put it?
Well, you know, when we speak of doing the work, I think we're talking about Mars, you know, and so Mars is in Aries right now, really powerful Mars in Aries, you know, it's the warrior path, you know, it's what it is that we're here to do in one sense. But, and so Jung attributes Mars with the process of individuation, you know, to become fully who we are. And so Jung talks about the 3 stages of the conionctio. The conionctio is this process of putting all the parts of who we are together. So the first stages of the conionctio is the integration of the shadow. So for many of us, most of us, you know, we haven't seen the second or the third stage yet, or some of us may be entering the second stage. But the first stage of the conionctio, which is essential, is the integration of the shadow. That means all of those parts of myself that are the problem, you know, where my depression, with my anger, with my rage, what's going on with the parts of myself that I'm not so proud of, you know, the shadow that usually shows itself, its ugly face in the worst possible time, or when we're, you know, whatever little problem or big problem that we have is manifested. So the integration of the shadow, so doing the work of giving a voice to the shadow. And there's a riddle about the shadow. The shadow is really that side of myself that is the spirit, but that's the spirit that I ignore within me. That part of myself that I'm not living, that part of myself that I'm not living tends to rise against me as my shadow and is really angry at me, kind of like a child who's being ignored. You know, it just like starts doing all the nasty things so that he will get the attention. So that's kind of the shadow work. You know, the shadow work is to learn to care for the inner child, learn to care for that side of myself that I'm not living. We live in a society that is so one-sided, so materialistic, that we ignore spirit work to, you know, to really explore the material, to explore sense gratification, to explore our you know, our materialism. But really, there's a whole other way of living, which is a spiritual way of living. And that spiritual way, that spirit in ourselves, it will become the shadow if we don't live it. Now, once we've learned to live it, then the process of individuation shifts to integrating the contrasexual side of our nature. So this is a really important, this is called the sacred marriage, the hieros. And so, as you know, and this is exhibited by the sun and the moon. So every one of us as a masculine soul, every one of us has a masculine and a feminine side. For a woman, the moon is more important. That exhibits the consciousness of the woman, and the moon would be the integration of the masculine soul. For a man, it's the opposite. The man is a masculine personality, and the integration of the feminine soul is the process. So Jung says that that the soul is in a contrasexual relation aspect to consciousness. And it's interesting how we're talking about this ambivalence between masculine and feminine, and becoming being both or expressing both. That is an alchemical perspective to the unity of personality. And so there's a very ancient basis to that understanding. So this stage of development of doing the work is giving a voice to our soul through expressing, for a woman, developing a relationship with the masculine soul; for a man, for the feminine soul. Does that make sense to you?
Totally, yeah. I think back to the shaman and how the shaman would always be able to integrate both the feminine and the masculine, or often looked at as both sexes.
Mm-hmm.
And then before that first stage of integrating the shadow is like I kept hearing resistance, the word resistance come up.
Oh, yes, we
where
resist.
we have resistance is where the work is often.
Well, I think as a general rule, whenever we come to doing the shadow work, we face tremendous resistance.
Absolutely.
It's not easy. And so that's why it's called doing the work. But that first stage, once we have managed to develop a relationship with the shadow, so this shadow will show up in dreams as well. Mm-hmm. And then there's a definite break when the anima for a man or the animus for a woman starts showing up in the dreams. It will transform from a shadow personality into a newborn child, or to a knight in shining armor for a woman, or different variations of that archetypal structure. And for a man, she will be the spiritual guide in the guise of a woman. Anyway, these are experience, and Jung mapped it all out in his study of dream analysis and the archetypes that are encountered in the process of individuation. So then at that point, we really keep track of our dreams in both stages. And we also can see it in the chart, as the relationship with the sun and the moon is. So this is a fascinating stage. And then it graduates into the third stage, which is then becomes a relationship with the divine, so that the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine turn into the great mother and the great father. And then one is in service to archetypal forces, and then one is here to fulfill the particular duty. So then the stages of individuation, we become in service. It's tantamount to the higher stages of expression, of the different religious symbols. It becomes really a religious experience. And so these are the three stages of doing the work. And that starts really, and this is a perfect, tying down to this new moon in Cancer, mm-hmm. and the new half of the year coming, really being focused on doing the work. And I was saying to my friend that really doing the work is not a hobby, it's not something that I take casually. Doing the work is actually a necessity. And why is doing the work a necessity?
That's a good question. It's a hard one to put in words. I feel like for me, it is kind of like a hobby or obsession, because when I'm not doing the work, or I'm not being aware of where the integration piece is, or what I'm needing to, what any experience is bringing to my awareness to be aware of, is a deep, uncomfortable angst, or a deep resistance, or a lack of love.
A lack of love, a deep spiritual angst, mm-hmm. a confrontation of the opposites. The shadow becomes that much more powerful against us. And we really, and that's the meaning of suffering. Huh? Suffering is not to be in connection, not to be doing the work. So this is this, this shadow work, this doing the work, this doing a work of integration and of the sacred marriage. It's a necessity, because if we don't do it, then we experience separation from ourselves. And that's a very painful process. And so in our society that we go after materialism, whoa, I think that that's the greatest crisis of our time, is that we simply don't understand what it means to doing the work.
Is it not Carl Jung who wrote the quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it here, until we understand our shadow or give it an expression, we let it rule our life and call it fate? Do you know what I mean? Absolutely.
It's very good paraphrasing. It's exactly what we were saying, in a different way of saying it, that our soul is, if it's ignored, becomes our shadow. And what people like to do about the shadow is they like to project it on another and blame it on another. It's my husband's fault, it's my wife's fault, it's the president's fault, it's the economy, it's the liberals, we blame a shadow on someone else, and we see it, and then it manifests as fate. I can't help it. This is just the way it is. And but then to integrate the shadow and to realize that the reason we have problems in the world is because we are not living our life fully, and that we are just as bad. We can't accuse others of being materialist if we're materialist ourselves, and so learning to withdraw the shadow and to do the shadow work, really, really important.
I also think of Cancer, and the arc, like the glyph of Cancer is this ball of the tail and a ball of the tail, and it's the water, the two ways going two ways. There's this duality in Cancer, and sometimes in the myth of Cancer, or people who have strong Cancer, I can see this either a deep spiritual connection shows up, a deep creative connection shows up, and or often both, and just in different times and flavors. There's also a deep taking things personally, and then that projection again happens instead of owning your relationship to spirit. Coming off of the I always say it wrong, help me, Mysterium
conionctionis.
Coming from
I'll have to give you some lessons on that one.
Okay, I won't make them go through it. Is the quote I thought would be a nice time to share from Liz Green's work with the Astrology of Fate. This is a quote she shared about Cancer, and it gets a little deep. So if you want to dive to this layer of understanding the fate of the myth of Cancer, I recommend reading the book if you have time or inspired.
The Astrology of Fate is one of the most important astrology book ever written. It is, in the beginning of my practice, I read it 7 times. It's filled with myths and stories, and it deals in profound way with the archetype of Pluto, the Great Mother, fate, the astrology of fate. It's a must. It's a bit to digest, requires some moral, intellectual courage, but well worth the deep dive. Go ahead.
Yeah, on that note, so for this Cancer New Moon, I feel like it's appropriate. A lot of Cancer energy is going to be coming up for us. I know that without me, God can no moment live. Were I to die, then he no longer could survive. God cannot without me a single worm create. Did I not share with him destruction were its fate? I am as great as God, and he is small as like me. He cannot be above, nor I below him be. I am God's child, his son, and he too is my child. We are the two in one, both son and father mild.
This is a quote from a book that Eric Neumann wrote. And Eric Neumann is an interesting gentleman, follower of Jung, that wrote some beautiful, beautiful poetry and books on mythology. So really look him up. But this was really fun. Thank you for sharing that. And then, so in this new moon coming up, what's the date of the new moon?
I was going to ask you to double check that. Another thing I'm going to ask double check is for you guys to check your charts. So this new moon's happening at 7 degrees of Cancer. It's a pretty potent degree point because it's also making an exact square to 7 degrees of Aries for Jupiter. So if you've got 7 degrees in any of the cardinal signs, so that would be Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, you're probably going to feel this pretty potent. You might get a little reset or a deep healing or a deep new understanding with that Jupiter influence. Be gentle with yourself, create the space, create the nest, which Cancer is very good at usually.
It's a good time for setting your intention for the next half of the year, and for nurturing yourself. It's been a long half of the ascending sun, and now we begin the descending process. It's all downhill from here. Woo! Thanks for joining us. Please do subscribe, and we'll keep them coming.
Yay.
Thank you, Diana. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Matan. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks you for subscribing and for watching the show.
Much
Over
love.
and out.